before the global recession, the retail sector in Nigeria was said to be growing at about 15% per annum, so it was doing really well. What's the situation today?
The situation today is very encouraging, and let me first remind you 15% of a very weak base. As you know, retail in Nigeria is not very matured. It's still a sunrise industry, and retailing is yet to take off to the levels which we could compare it to any developed countries. So 15%, well, I personally believe in the next coming years it's going to be a lot more and a lot faster. The base has to grow wider in terms of the number of retailers in Nigeria. Currently, if you talk about retailing, you would be more focusing on supermarkets and possibly some electronic companies, electronic stores. But what we are missing out here is organized and major brands in clothing, shoes, footwear, perfumery stores, and various other retailing opportunities which are equally available in this country, which needs to be fulfilled immediately.
You say we are starting off a low base. Just give us an indication relative to other critical sectors such as the oil industry or the banking industry, which are mainstays of that economy. How's the retail sector performing, and what can the government do to boost the capacity of the sector?
Now, you see, where the oil companies are concerned, you would find all the oil companies in this country, because after all, there are very few countries in the world where these oil companies have opportunities. Now, where Nigeria is concerned with 140 to 150 million people, anyone's guess. If we have to compare with another economy like in South Africa, how many stores do we have in this country? How many shopping centers do we have? And if we have to compare just a basic middle class and upper class, would we put a number at 40 million people? That was equal to what South Africa has to offer today. I personally feel where the banking industry and the oil companies, they have a lot of opportunities too, but in retail, we haven't even scratched the surface. That's exactly what we as a company keep talking about, and we're very keen and interested in starting a retail revolution in this country. A retail revolution which would open the doors to many brands. Is not just for us, but for anyone who was interested to coming to Nigeria, giving them an opportunity to come and set their base over here and trade and do business.
Okay, now you mentioned the fact that Nigeria has this critical mass of over 140 million people, but we also know that the average Nigerian spends the bulk of their disposable income on housing and rental, on transportation, on food, and of course on energy, feeding generators and the like. So for those who have a little bit of discretionary spending left, what is the purchasing power of the middle class in Nigeria?
Now, let's take for example, you're right. Everyone knows that food is required. You need clothing, you need shoes. Equally, you need shelter. But if Nigerians can afford to spend such fancy figures on telecommunications, owning 3 phones and 4 phones sometimes, and spending thousands of nairas, if not much more, on just communications, could we just benchmark that and say, how much would they allocate towards purchasing for their personal requirements, personal needs, for daily use? It's anyone's guess. It's so difficult to throw a number, but when we know that we haven't even began, sky's the limit.
All right, let's talk about the potential of the retailers, because you say Nigeria needs to start thinking about bringing in international brands, being competitive on that level, creating shopping centers. We know that in general, authorities have tended to be quite protective of local manufacturing, introducing quite high tariff barriers for any imports into the economy. As they try to grow retail, they've reduced those tariffs to about 12%, but effectively it's still difficult to import goods into Nigeria. How is it benefiting local manufacturers as you grow retail, or working against them?
See, the advantage the retailers will have in this economy is that the trade barriers in this country really are not major trade barriers, but the regulatory authorities who are scared of not allowing just small-time retailers or small-time traders to regulate themselves. But if players like Spar and players like let's say Marks and Spencers or Carrefour or Walmart would want to come to these countries. These companies have got such rich management culture, and their processes are far advanced, and they are at global standards. These same agencies are willing to relax and say, we would allow you to self-regulate. And I think once self-regulatory opportunities are given to major brands, this economy would be much more easier to manage in terms of all the various logistics problems you mentioned would be, thrown aside. I'm supposed it'll be thrown aside very quickly.
Right.
And I have spoken to the government authorities, and they're very willing. They're very, very excited about the retail opportunities, and they are ready to talk to big companies. And it's a clear indication. That's why SPAR has come in here, and I can assure you, SPAR was not very keen on Nigeria a few years ago. It was when they saw the opportunities and they realized that people are willing to listen, Nigeria is willing to welcome them,
Right.
and thus SPAR came into Nigeria.